Well, it's Thursday, March 31st. This is our webinar on Alberta's High on Hydrogen, with our principal presenter being Dale Nally, Alberta Associate Minister of Natural Gas and Electricity, and Yogi Schulz, Bill Howell, and Brent Lakeman form our respondents panel, and will be available for additional comments. The minister has to leave in about 40 minutes or so, but without a lot of further ado, I'm going to ask Dale if you want to begin your presentation, and welcome.
Good. Well, thank you, Perry, for having me. So as Perry said, my name is Dale Nally. I'm the Associate Minister of Natural Gas and Electricity, and I am just so pleased to be here with you and to be able to speak about one of my favorite topics. And in fact, I'm known within cabinet as, they try not to ask me too many hydrogen questions, because when you get me talking about hydrogen, I don't want to stop. I don't have that problem with electricity, by the way, but it's just hydrogen is such an exciting field right now. But the conversation is changing a little bit, because when the conversations on hydrogen started, they weren't really about energy security. But now energy security is quickly becoming front of mind for everybody, and we're seeing that with what's playing out in Europe and in Ukraine right now, and those sad events. I think Minister Savage put it best when she said that the energy that powers our homes should not be the same energy that funds what destroys them. And I think that was put very well by Minister Savage. And so we need to start looking at where our energy comes from. And we've been saying that for a long time in Alberta, that we have a long history of responsible energy production. And people that care about environmental, social governance should care about Alberta energy. And that applies just as much to hydrogen as it does to every other energy product. And so hydrogen is definitely one of the most promising opportunities that have come in a long time. And I'm proud of the work that our province has done so far on the hydrogen front. It's work that has put us in a good position to capitalize on that enormous opportunity while allowing our industry partners to lead along the way. And I just want to be clear about where we see hydrogen going, because we have been blessed in this province with energy riches, starting with oil and gas. And we don't believe that oil and gas is, in fact, all the credible forecasts say that oil and gas is not going anywhere. And so we don't see hydrogen as a replacement for oil and gas. We see hydrogen as being right up there alongside oil and gas and being part of a clean, diversified portfolio of energy products. And that's how we see hydrogen playing itself out. We have a proud history and reputation as a responsible energy producer, with decades of innovation and industry leadership under our belts. And as I mentioned, high ESG standards. ESG standards that we don't get credit for, I might add, but we have, because we don't just look at the E, we look at the environmental, the social, and the governance. And Alberta has some of the highest ESG standards in the world amongst energy producing regions. It's that expertise and reputation that will let us move hydrogen forward, continuing to uphold our high standards and capitalize on an amazing economic opportunity that will bring generational wealth to Albertans. And this is exactly the opportunity that we're talking about. It's generational wealth. In the same way the oil sands has created generational wealth for Albertans, hydrogen has an opportunity to create generational wealth, but only if we do the right things now, so that we are going to be positioned to benefit from that generational wealth. And in terms of, when I say generational wealth, I've heard different numbers that have been bounced around. I've heard that by 2050, hydrogen will be a $2.5 trillion industry. I've seen other forecasts where people have said hydrogen will be a $11 trillion industry by 2050. So whether it's 2.5 trillion or it's 11, we know this. It's a significant opportunity. And it is an incredible opportunity for this province, not just to have a cleaner energy future, but it's an incredible opportunity for jobs for Albertans, because the skills that you need to be successful in hydrogen are the exact same skill sets that you need to be successful in oil and gas. And so it is, we are positioned well for that. And lastly, the royalties that this could create for the province is huge. We have a 200-year supply of natural gas that we are currently sitting on based on current standards. and the royalties that this could represent for the province, as well as the tax opportunities for producers and everyone else along the hydrogen value chain. So obviously we are incredibly excited about it. And as I said, we are well positioned. We've already proven that we are the largest hydrogen producing jurisdiction in Canada. We currently make about 2.4 million tons a year of hydrogen, and it makes us a global leader in hydrogen production. Unfortunately, it's gray production, so it's not the clean hydrogen. Since the main appeal of hydrogen is that it emits no carbon dioxide at combustion, we're encouraging a shift in Alberta's main hydrogen production towards cleaner methods, blue, green, and quite frankly, everything in between. It's hard to stay on top of how many types of hydrogen now between sapphire and crystal and everything else. But I think what we have to focus on is that it's a clean hydrogen. Now, thankfully, we have all the tools that we need in Alberta to be successful in hydrogen production. As I mentioned, we have enormous natural gas reserves that will allow us to quickly scale up production, as well as the technology and experience to pair that production with carbon capture. Carbon capture utilization and storage, or CCUS, is a key part of our hydrogen future. And thankfully, Alberta has a geology that is naturally well suited for CCUS, pairing with that experience that I just mentioned. From what I understand from CCUS, you need an alternating porous, non-porous rock formation to really enable CCUS, the storage piece. And we have been blessed with that geology. And so this means we've been blessed twice. We've been blessed once with the natural resources that we have in this province, and now we've been blessed a second time with the geology to store that carbon. And as Brent mentioned, there was an announcement today. Minister Savage has announced 6 projects that we're going to be moving forward with. That will be hydrogen hubs, and this will allow all industries the opportunity to participate in the clean energy future by giving them chances to participate in carbon capture, utilization, and storage. So it's not just opportunity for oil and gas; it's opportunities for power generation and fertilizer, cement. This is really how we're going to leverage that porous, non-porous rock formation to go into a cleaner energy future. We have already stored safely CO2 through projects like the Quest facility and the Alberta Carbon Trunk Line. I heard a criticism recently about the carbon capture that we currently have in this province, and that it only captures 30 or 40% of the carbon. And I can't tell you that's true or not. But I do know this. That was one of the first carbon capture, utilization, and storage projects that we had. With the technology that we have available to us now in hydrogen, because industry is moving from what is known as steam methane reforming to auto thermal reforming. And please don't ask me to go through the exact specifications, but what it means to us is that the autothermal reforming will capture 95% of carbon emissions. So if you ever hear anyone say that blue hydrogen is not low carbon, that is not true. It captures 95% of the carbon, and it is a clean energy source. Now, we're taking another step forward by creating environmentally safe carbon capture hubs across the province, which will give all sorts of industries the chance to reduce their emissions and shift towards a cleaner energy future. And that is the announcement that Minister Savage made today. The hydrogen production industry is going to be one huge beneficiary of that shift. Since we have the technology, the experience, and the resources to quickly increase low carbon hydrogen production, we're in an ideal position to meet growing demand from around the world. In fact, we expect to produce some of the lowest cost clean hydrogen in the world. And our experts are telling us that we will have the second cheapest clean hydrogen in the world will come from right here in Alberta. And then the next question to that is, who has the cheapest? And the answer to that is Russia. Russia will have cheaper blue hydrogen than we do. And I can tell you, and I've been saying this before a war broke out in Ukraine. Well, it didn't break out, it was an invasion. But before there was war in Ukraine, we've been saying that companies the global jurisdictions want Alberta energy because it's responsibly sourced. There are a number of industries that are moving to incorporate hydrogen into their operations, including major commercial sectors like transportation and heating. With countries around the world looking to make these shifts, Alberta has an opportunity to become a key exporter of clean hydrogen. This move isn't just a good economic chance for Alberta and our energy workers. It means a more diverse global energy system and a lower carbon future all at once. We have an opportunity for first mover advantage because we have this wonderful 200-year resource that I mentioned of natural gas. We've already got the expertise in hydrogen production. We've got the trained and skilled workforce that have been working in this industry already, whether it's hydrogen or whether it's oil and gas. So we are positioned to have first mover advantage. And blue hydrogen will have a significant cost advantage over other colors such as green, and that means it's going there first. And we want to be part of that. Here in Alberta, we have plans to support the clean hydrogen economy in 4 key sectors. In addition to transportation and residential and commercial heating, we see enormous possibility for clean hydrogen in power generation, as well as throughout the province's industrial sector. These industries and the opportunity they hold are outlined in our hydrogen roadmap, which was released late last year. Our roadmap is focused on establishing a solid base of demand, starting with these 4 target industries, which can then feed into additional industries and export opportunities down the line. In Alberta, we're advancing a combination of policy actions that will work in tandem to begin growing Alberta's local demand. Some of these actions, like de-risking early investments, may involve leveraging some of government's financial resources. But for the most part, we see our role as enabling our energy sector to do what it does best, to innovate and to lead. CCUS is a great example. The carbon hubs I mentioned earlier will be operated by the private sector through a competitive bidding process. Other low-cost opportunities to move hydrogen forward on a local level include establishing a clear and efficient regulatory system, and leading the development of partnerships that can help drive that integration of hydrogen. Here in the Edmonton area, we have the Greater Edmonton Region Hydrogen Hub, which is a collection of industry, municipal representatives, and associations that work together to build up the use of hydrogen across the region. For example, a hydrogen bus that serves a municipality could be refueled by a service station that is built and maintained by a hydrogen-focused association, supplied by a hydrogen producer located nearby. Building interconnected networks that could help hydrogen grow organically is what is going to help us leapfrog into the future. In terms of all the different colors of hydrogen, I mentioned blue and green. Those are the 2 most common ones right now, and most people are probably aware. Blue hydrogen is from natural gas. Green hydrogen is from water. Our position is that we are agnostic to the color of hydrogen. If a company wants to come to Alberta and they want to build a world-scale green hydrogen facility, as long as they're going to hire Albertans to do it, then that is something that I support. Now, as I say that, there are significant advantages over blue hydrogen. It is significantly cheaper. We've already got that expertise, that skill set that we need to leverage that. And so we are absolutely well positioned. And lastly, both blue and green have water usage. Green hydrogen is unable to recycle the water, and that presents some unique challenges to jurisdictions like Alberta that is landlocked, and we don't have significant water rights. And so I think that we will see green hydrogen production in Alberta, but I think it will be more niche in nature. Where I see green hydrogen being more successful is in New Zealand, for example. They're really pursuing green hydrogen because of their access to the coast, and you can desalinate it for that process. So we're just not in that position here. So we really believe that the advantage for Alberta is the blue hydrogen, and that what the world scale production that we're going to see in this province is going to be blue hydrogen for the foreseeable future. But again, there will be niche green projects as well. Now, that future is a bright one for Alberta, Canada, and the global energy market as a whole. Hydrogen offers a complete package: clean energy produced from many sources, with the ability to store energy better than battery storage, a long track record of use across industries, not to mention responsibility and ethically sourced countries like Canada. With so much potential surrounding this industry, we're absolutely convinced that hydrogen can be the next great opportunity for Alberta's energy sector and Canada's position as an energy exporter. And as I said earlier, I really truly believe that it is generational wealth, and the scope and size will certainly compete with that of the oil sands. I truly believe that. It will help cement our standing as a place where customers from around the world can find reliable, responsibly produced energy. We've been doing a lot of work sharing the story of Alberta's energy industry with everyone around the world. That includes showing off all the hard work our energy companies have done to advance their environmental, social, and governance. For example, Alberta companies representing 75% of oil sands production are committed to a net zero future by 2050. And I'm proud to say that the oil sands committed to this net zero by 2050 with zero prodding from the Alberta government. This was industry doing what's right. And it's just another great example of Alberta innovation that is committed to high standards of environmental social governance. We have no doubt Alberta companies will not just reach that goal, but they'll continue to show leadership along the way. Adding clean hydrogen to the mix of Alberta's energy products will be even more proof that we are global leaders in how energy can combine good economic sense with environmental protection. And that is the key message. We used to be under this belief that you had to choose between the economy or the environment, and you don't have to make that choice anymore. And hydrogen is going to be that bridge between the environment and the economy. Given all the uncertainty and discussion around energy security lately, this is an increasingly important part of how policymakers and companies are evaluating their future options. Clean Alberta hydrogen offers us one more tool in the tool shed to help attract eyes and attention back to our energy sector. It also ensures we are adapting to the changing marketplace overall. Alongside the enormous investments we've seen in renewable energy over the last few years, ensuring Alberta is providing the whole range of energy that supports economic development will ensure we remain front of mind for potential investors and international companies. It will also make sure we continue to have one of the most widely skilled workforces in the world, which will be able to continue our track record of innovation and leadership. We've already seen some enormous international investment interest in Alberta's clean hydrogen space, with several world-class facilities announced in 2021. And I have to tell you, my whole team is stunned by the pace at which hydrogen is moving forward. The fact that we saw so many announcements in the last 12 months is incredible. We saw ATCO and Suncor announced a hydrogen production facility. We saw Atoshu and Petronas, Mitsubishi and Shell, Air Products, Northern Petrochemicals. All 6 of those projects are hydrogen projects. There is a 7th project that has not been announced, so I can't tell you the name or the scale, but that's actually 7 world-scale hydrogen facilities. One of them is for the oil sands, one of them is for more domestic use, and the other 4 are for export to Asia. And that's what's so exciting. We never thought that we were going to get into the export game as quickly as we are. Now, for anyone that's wondering what we're going to do about a pipeline, ammonia and methanol are actually excellent carriers of hydrogen. So these companies will actually be producing ammonia or methanol, or in some cases both, and they'll be shipping that to the coast on a train. And then from there, they'll ship it to Asia via boat, and then they will remove the hydrogen from it once it gets there. So these are exactly the kind of projects that we will be able to keep attracting and which will expand Alberta's energy options for decades to come. With such a large opportunity in front of us, we know we have to act fast. And that's why when we released our roadmap last year, we accelerated our goal of reaching export readiness by 10 years compared to our natural gas vision and strategy. And again, the time between when we released the natural gas strategy and vision and when we released the hydrogen roadmap, incredible things had begun to happen. And so, like I said, we are pleasantly surprised by the speed and pace at which hydrogen is moving forward. We are looking to start supplying hydrogen to consumers around the world by 2030, because that's where the truly once in a generational opportunity comes up. It's one thing to create hydrogen for domestic demand, but when we can get our hydrogen to global markets, that's when things are going to get really good. I am pleased to say that we're already implementing key action items in the roadmap. For instance, in Budget 2022, we announced the establishment of a Clean Hydrogen Center of Excellence. We'll have more details to come on the Center of Excellence in the coming weeks. I encourage you to look at the hydrogen convention at the end of next month. I am incredibly proud of the hydrogen convention that is going to be happening next month in Edmonton. And then I certainly look forward to that. If anyone here has not seen that, I encourage you to take a look at it. We're also actively working with stakeholders to establish a regulatory system to enable hydrogen to be blended with natural gas into residential and commercial heating markets. Just like how the oil sands have put us on the global map and provided billions of dollars in economic growth and opportunities, hydrogen can do the same for the next generation of Albertans. Hydrogen really is the next big thing in the energy world, and Alberta is poised to be able to play an even bigger role in that global picture than we already are. I'll leave it there for now, and I'm looking forward to hearing what others have to say on this really exciting opportunity that we have in front of us. I'm so glad that you had me here today. And as I mentioned early on, this is one of my favorite topics, is to discuss hydrogen, and particularly hydrogen for Alberta. And so I appreciate the invite, and certainly I would be happy to take any questions if there are any.
Okay, thank you, Dale. I'll ask Bill and Yogi and Brent to unmute. The chat in the background was focused primarily on one thing. Where are the markets and how are we going to get things to market? And you have addressed that by talking about ammonia and methanol being sort of the partners in the distribution. Are there pipelines for hydrogen?
Well, there are. As you know, we are challenged by pipelines in this country. We have a federal government with a hostile energy policy that has made it very difficult to build pipelines. We're hopeful that that is changing with the increased light that is being shined on energy security, and hopefully that the feds will come around on hydrogen and the role that Alberta and Canada could play on the global stage in reducing global greenhouse gas emissions. I will say this. Even if we could build a pipeline tomorrow, and even if we had the $10 billion to build the pipeline, we'd still have to fill the pipeline, and there may not be enough export demand initially. And this is the challenge that every jurisdiction is having right now, is we could go all in and build all these world scale export facilities, but if we don't have the demand, then the export facilities fail. So we could also go all in, and we could create demand on the consumption side. But if the export or the production is not there, then that's going to fail. So the challenge, Perry, is how do you find a way for the production and the consumption to have incremental improvements that match each other? And that's what we're trying to do. And so we're trying to, we're fortunate with the oil sands, and there's a natural fit to get hydrogen to the oil sands. We're also trying to stimulate local demand by offering the blending of hydrogen for purposes of residential and commercial heating, and by exporting ammonia and methanol, which is a carrier of hydrogen, on a train to the coast. That gets us in the export game, and it helps us with those incremental improvements till we get to a position where, one, there's enough demand for a pipeline, and two, we're in a position to build one.
Well, Lu Wu, the Chinese consulate, made a very strong point of the energy appetite for China, but I won't go any further. Yogi, Dave, I know you've got a question. I'm going to let Yogi and Bill and et cetera get in first, and then I'll call on you last, David. Go ahead, Yogi.
Thank you, Perry. I appreciate the overview presentation, Minister. That was very helpful.
Thank you.
There's a couple of things that I was a little surprised that didn't come up. Maybe you're being Mr. Nice Guy today. One of the huge benefits that I see of the roadmap is how well it's written to align with the agenda of the federal government, and gives Alberta points for actually aligning with the agenda of the federal government, when so often Alberta is seen as the bad boy, the rogue, out of control capitalist outfit that doesn't seem to be able to get the message. So I'm impressed that in this area, the government is very much aligned. I don't know if you want to jump in with a comment.
I'll make a comment, because what you just described is the perception of Alberta. and their cabinet ministers like Minister Guilbeault that think that is Alberta. And then they come here and then they discover that in fact, Alberta is actually a destination for renewable power companies. Renewable power companies are attracted to Alberta because of our open and free market. And so in fact, we're embracing renewable energy at a rate right now faster than other jurisdictions. And the Canadian Energy Regulator has actually pointed to us as quickly as becoming the destination in Canada. So we absolutely are forward thinking in terms of having a diversified portfolio of energy products. Hydrogen is one of them. And we worked with the feds on their hydrogen roadmap. So I think it's pretty clear that they are aligned absolutely. The good news is the federal Liberals have done many things, including their announcement 2 days ago of their climate strategy, which is I mean we won't go down that path. Suffice it to say it's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's another meeting.
Yeah, that's another meeting. So I'll call it ridiculous and move on. But there is no light between us and the feds on hydrogen. That is the one bit of good news. We worked with them on their roadmap, and I believe that they are supportive on hydrogen.
Okay, Bill, you want to raise a question?
I think after so many years, I'm a bit surprised at the, as you mentioned, the rate of change that seems to be occurring in the area.
Yeah.
Are there a few other issues that you struggle with? What might happen with respect to CO2 taxes or costs attributed to CO2, whether they go up or down per ton, and how that influences some of the other foreign countries?
Well,
I liked a lot of your technology comments too.
I mean, I'm not concerned about the carbon tax from that perspective. Because there won't be a carbon tax on hydrogen because it emits zero carbon at ignition, and that's the beauty of clean hydrogen is that when you at combustion there's no carbon to be released in the atmosphere, so there won't be a carbon tax. A carbon tax does make hydrogen more attractive, but I want to make it very clear. I do not want that to be the value proposition for hydrogen, because I don't want people to want hydrogen because they're broke going, with natural gas and other fuels. So I don't think that's the answer to go. $170 ton of carbon tax, that hurts Albertans, and we don't want to see that. But we do believe that Albertans and Canadians and residents of Earth want clean energy products, and hydrogen is that clean energy product. And so we want to be able to provide it.
Is that estimate of a 200-year supply based on current consumption? Where's that 200-year figure come from?
Yeah, it's based on current consumption. Yeah.
Okay, but if we get into this big time, is that 200 or 100 or 10?
I think we get into this big time. Sure, we could make it 100, but I think 100 years is a pretty good runway for an energy product. 100 years from now, they'll be splitting some molecule you and I have never heard of to produce energy. So I know the challenge is our natural gas, just like our oil, is a significant resource, and it's worth something today. It's probably not going to be worth much 100 years from today. So we want to leverage that in any way that we can. Okay,
Brent, your turn. And I know you've got a convention coming up, so don't hesitate. And Dale's sort of giving you the opening there, but proceed.
Well, maybe I'll jump on that right away. That's a great plug. We're so excited, with the Canadian Hydrogen Convention coming up at the end of April 26th to 28th. This is going to be one of the largest events, certainly in the Edmonton region, in quite some time, where we're looking at, potentially up to 4,000 people coming in from around the world, looking at the hydrogen opportunities here in Alberta, in Canada. So, potentially up to 20 international delegations, very significant speaker program. We have the chairman of Air Products coming in, and it's, to get someone like that to come to Edmonton for this event is just incredible. So we're really proud of that. It really just speaks again to the opportunity that we're seeing here. And maybe just the other thing I'd highlight, I think the minister really hit it perfectly on the head around the opportunity. But the one thing maybe just to add is, once you're seen to be a reliable supplier of low cost, low carbon hydrogen, what else can that do for your economy? So, it kind of speaks a bit to that diversification agenda. But as global supply chains are changing, we're starting to get some really interesting inquiries from investors, from industry around the world to think, well, maybe there's an opportunity here to be doing some things that maybe traditionally we haven't been so focused on. So, it's still early days of those conversations, but I think we're really at the cusp of some pretty significant changes. And I think, Edmonton, Alberta is positioned very well when you look at things like the policy and regulatory framework around CO2 storage, the CO2 hubs that were announced today. So I think that's really positioning us nicely. And we can then interact with these investors to say, we've got that low cost energy here that you're looking for not just for the next 10 years, but for the next 50 years for these facilities that are going to be around for a long time. So I think that's the other piece of the conversation we want to highlight. And then maybe just finally, the Edmonton Region Hydrogen Hub that we're very much a part of is really working to build demand. So I saw some questions in the chat around transportation, for example. So the feeling is that, if we can do a little more work on building demand with key sectors like long haul trucking, I'm not sure if we're going to see necessarily demand for passenger vehicles using hydrogen, maybe for some fleets. But some of these sectors are still very large. When you look at the trucking sector, the trucks going up and down the highway from Edmonton to Calgary, if you can take a coordinated approach to that, now you can really accelerate demand for hydrogen, which may lead to more production, which improves the overall economics, which could also fund some of the infrastructure that will even make further improvements. If you can start to look at some domestic pipelines to move hydrogen around your region, then you can really start to attract even more investment here. So it's very synergistic in nature, and I just thought that would be worth highlighting as well.
I agree with everything that Brent just said.
Yeah.
I want Alberta to be viewed as a global leader in hydrogen. And that means we're not just using hydrogen, we're producing hydrogen, we're exporting hydrogen. We have things like this hydrogen conference so that we are seen as a global. When people think hydrogen, I want them thinking of Alberta. I'd love to see that hydrogen is bought and sold in Alberta, priced in Alberta. That would be exciting to see that level of standards set for hydrogen. It's lofty, it's optimistic, but we're already global leaders in hydrogen production. We just have to flip the switch and make it clean hydrogen production.
Do you feel that industry is aligned? Is industry understanding the story?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
So I know you've got a few more, maybe one more question. Dave, you've raised one that's unique. What about using gray water or produced water for H2 production?
The minister was saying about it'll take 100 years to split molecules and stuff like that. I propose that it's already happening today.
Mm-hmm.
Our company is involved with some researchers who have essentially creates hydrogen out of water without electricity. So it's a catalytic reaction that does this, and the results are very, very promising and could be, bring in the opportunities for hydrogen fueled cars, where you simply fill your car with water and some catalyst, and you can generate through an internal combustion engine. The same thing goes for home heating, etc. Every home has a source of water. You just use your gray water and you can produce hydrogen from that and heat your homes through a typical furnace and replace natural gas. It's an interesting technology. We're going to be explaining a little bit more about that in the future, and
Who's
just want to let you know.
Tell us what your company's name is.
It's a new spin-off company from Applied Quantum Materials. The new company is Dark Matter Materials, and it will be we'll be launching in within the next month.
Let me say, I look forward to continuing to track your company and seeing more, and it's very exciting. As I said early on, we are agnostic to the color of hydrogen. If somebody, and it sounds like you are, wants to come to Alberta and hire Albertans to build your facility and run your facility, listen, that's exactly what we want to do. That's why we're going down this path. I have some concerns because of on the recycling, you can't recycle the water. I like your idea of using gray water. I'm not sure that we would be able to get it to the world scale, production that we'd like to see on the blue hydrogen. And that's why I said I anticipate we'll see more niche. But listen, as long as if your technology is successful and you're going to hire Albertans to deploy it, that's exactly why we're going down this path. And that's why we have a hydrogen roadmap, and it's not a blue hydrogen roadmap. If companies step up like David's is, we'll absolutely embrace that.
So Peter, you have time for one more question?
One more, and then I do have to go off for this.
Peter, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Well, I posed two questions. So maybe the one my first one you answered to some degree. So my second question, Mr. Minister, thank you for your talk. is how can Alberta promote hydrogen consumption in Alberta, pardon me, as well as in Canada and abroad. And I note, for example, and one of my colleagues is on the line here, he might add some more, but I noted that Alberta has actually assisted, Canadian Pacific in developing their hydrogen-powered train. And I'm just wondering about, more hydrogen power for things like trains and long haul, as you mentioned, trucking. So if you could comment on that, I appreciate it.
Sure, absolutely. And it goes back to we want to have incremental increases to production and consumption to match each other. And so mobility is part of that. And, Brent mentioned that we're probably not going to see passenger cars. I mean, I hope we do, but Brent's right, we probably won't. But I see it happening for buses, trains. We're going to be, we won't be, but there will be a pilot this year. We'll have 2 long haul transport trucks going between Edmonton and Calgary that'll be fueled by hydrogen. City of Edmonton has ordered their buses. That will be part of getting that demand up there. The other part will be the blending. And if we go back 10 or 15 years, there was an opportunity for people to self-select on the utility bills that they wanted wind, and they were willing to pay more for it. Now we all know, how the electricity works. They weren't actually getting electricity from, that was powered by wind, but they were paying more so that it could happen. And so we may see that may be a business model that we see taking off. Lots of these things have yet to be worked out, but those are the kind of things that we see moving forward. There is a company that is looking at, and I'm not going to say the name because I don't know if it's been announced, but they're looking at having a hydrogen community. And if it's been announced, then please you throw out the name, but and give them a plug. But there's a builder that wants to have a hydrogen community in Alberta and they want to get to pure hydrogen too, not just the blend. So it's happening now. We know California has 7,000 hydrogen fueled vehicles. We want to get Alberta to that tipping point, right, where we see that happening here. So.
Well, thank you. You've given us a few minutes more than we'd asked for or expected. So thank you very
much. The chief of staff just walked in. I really have to go. Like I said, I love talking about hydrogen. I really do. Perry, I'm glad that you were able to put this together so we could make this conversation happen. I've certainly enjoyed it.
One concluding observation. I mean, the world of energy is a world of controversy today, and this is one of the first love-ins that I've moderated. So I've got to thank you very much. And thank you for the respectful questions that have been raised. So you're welcome to join us at any time.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Perry. Thanks, everybody, for the great questions.
Thank you, Minister.
Okay.
So Yogi, you want to launch the next round and give us some of your overview and your commentary?
One of the observations I have, it's interesting that the minister didn't emphasize this, and maybe it's just too boring. And I noticed that the chat was all about hydrogen pipelines and ammonia, and I think that's great. But we have an opportunity to do what we already do, only do it bigger and better. So for example, the hydrogen that we produce today, significant volumes, as the minister said, is number one, used for upgrading bitumen to synthetic crude oil. Well, of all the bitumen we produce, we're only doing that to 1/3 of the bitumen that we produce. So we have an opportunity with better, cheaper hydrogen to up that percentage, presumably from 1/3, maybe we can get it to all the way to 100%. So there's an opportunity for all those who whine and complain that we don't get enough value, we don't do enough further processing of the natural resource that we're blessed with. The second opportunity is that hydrogen is used right now to make low sulfur diesel in refining. Well, the world needs more of that. We can make more of that. And the third opportunity is in petrochemicals. We say we want more petrochemicals. Absolutely. So this is where we can make what we talked about before, the ammonia here in Alberta. We can also make the methanol. We can do more of that we're already doing. And we can do more of the carbon black that we're already doing. So maybe this is too boring for people to talk about, but I see this as a very immediate opportunity to scale up all of these hydrogen consumptive economic activities that already exist. So
The broader the opportunities, the more diversification you have and the less risky you are for any one market collapsing and
yeah,
the whole
and
thing.
these are all
collapsing.
items we understand, and the demand for this on a global basis is going nowhere but up. So great opportunity.
When you talk about upgrading, you're affecting markets that today expect us to send them a certain type of product. When we start upgrading, we may well, in fact, be competitive and not be welcome among the market that we serve today.
Maybe, but you know, right now we sell this product called dilbit, which is bitumen with lots of light ends thrown in.
Yeah.
Well, that's very costly. And if the refinery had what we call synthetic crude oil, I think they would be happy to take that as well in many cases. Now, you're right. There are a few refineries that just love the dilbit, but there are lots more refineries that can handle the synthetic crude oil than can handle the dilbit.
Well, and it's I mean, energy is an incredibly dynamic market right now. When you think about what hydrogen is going to do when it's on scale and is truly an alternative or a supplement, we've got so much diversity in energy supply. That's going to have a bearing on cost as well. It's going to be extremely cost competitive. Good news. Bill, you wanna give us your commentary?
I was going to focus on issues of safety and technology science. And so I'm going to cut back a little bit. I don't have the illustrations to show you at this time, but my sense of this conversation in the chat room is that everybody is taking safety for granted, which is good in a sense, because hydrogen has been around hydrogen in vehicles has been around a long time. Boy, it must be 20, 30. We're running a bus for the Canadian Senate that was hydrogen fuel cell powered. And that was stopped around the mid 2000s, I think, because they had run it for a long time. I wanted to get. That was, I worked at Natural Resources Canada. However, I would like to bring out that large-scale public deployment of hydrogen fuel cell vehicles should be safe, but there are always questions related to that. If there are people that are very concerned about that, one example I had, IEEE committee, I think it was IEEE anyways, it was for the Canadian Electrical Code Part 2 for establishing codes and standards for the charging of electric vehicles in the home. Contractors or construction companies can't start putting in charging stations unless there's a code. So that was a long time ago, but it paves the way. And I'm sure they've done all that a long time ago in hydrogen fuel cells. But there is an issue of follow-up. And the one particular interesting question was that mercaptan is a beautiful safety device for natural gas. If you have a leak of natural gas, you can actually smell it, which would not be the case without the mercaptans. Just high purity. I have no idea if they've actually found a stench, I guess is the word, that they're happy with for high purity hydrogen fuel cells. They promising ideas 10, 15 years ago, but I don't know if they're there. Hydrogen is probably the worst case scenario on criteria like flash points and flammability limits of any fuel. It's not as bad as it may seem in some respects. And
why do you say it's not as bad? What is it that is giving you comfort? Is it the fact that since the Hindenburg dirigible went down, we've made headway on how to secure it or store it?
Yeah, well, often they do mention nowadays, which I was surprised to see on some of the websites because it was, but not too many people were aware of it. The fire of the Hindenburg was actually the skin, not the hydrogen itself. Mm-hmm. If actual hydrogen catches fire, you probably won't see it. Well, on something that size, radiation well, a blast. So it's really an issue of a bunch of properties that you think this is going to be so bad, we're all going to die. But it's screamingly high diffusivity. So in any even modestly ventilated conditions, it dissipates faster than anything else.
Okay.
We did have an issue. I was involved in an underground hard rock mining project, and you could collect hydrogen in pockets of the ceilings of the tunnels, which would be very problematic. They did huge computational fluid dynamics type modeling of hydrogen and safety. It will also be important for any indoor stuff. And I think at least mention Brilliant Light Power Company of Randall Mills down in Boston. And so this issue of the minister spoke about self or auto cracking. There's an issue of that black soot that they get. Randall Mills and a few other things. There's some really interesting plasma style concepts coming around with this. Randall Mills was a catalytic surface. I don't know what applied quantum materials does, but you mentioned a black material or black something or other. That sounds like
So,
black light power.
You want to elaborate, Dave?
And,
well, what
and
it,
so the
it-
issue
it-
is,
it's a
oh,
catalyst.
sorry, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's just a catalyst that dissociates. It's called a catalytic gasification of water. So it actually breaks
Which
the
is
water
kind of-
molecules.
You don't want to get too
Which is what
technical, but
Randall Mills.
there's your answer to what.
Yeah, all I'm going to say is, okay, I'll get to the core of this, but that's exactly what Randall Mills has been doing since 1986. Okay, but the trick is Dave Antoniuk said something that made, and that is we're actually talking about water here. And I had a joke in my presentation about what would happen if you were driving across the Sahara Desert in one of these vehicles and your partner drank the last bottle of water just when your car needed it. I mean, other than a scenario like that, you almost, you know, when you look at it, it's almost like you can't lose with this water as a fuel, which is, I don't, and the case of Randall Mills, it's fractional quantum levels of electrons of hydrogen, which is, the science is just fantastic. So
See,
maybe you're not going to the half quantum level.
Say, Bill.
This is almost like, okay, just to summarize, this is
No.
in between
I
what you would normally
want
consider.
to comfort you with something. If you have a PowerPoint, one
Okay.
or two or 10 slides, email them to me or get them to me or get them posted, and I'll get them to everyone who asks for a copy. I mean, you've obviously put some work in, and there is a
Okay.
way. I now know how I could put it up, but you're going to take 30 minutes going through
Yeah.
those slides. So why don't I just make them available to everybody, and
No,
they can always follow up then with you.
you
with
know, it's
additional
actually,
questions.
yeah, it's actually easier than that, Perry. It's only a web page, and the web page files and actually a presentation. I failed on the audio side. Otherwise, I would have had a video ready for this meeting.
Well.
And I almost missed the meeting because I was doing that. So the big Toniak's comment is that we're between nuclear energy and normal chemical engineering and energy levels. And it's phenomenal energy we're talking about. I'm not sure about Dave's process. It might not get to the fractional quantum levels, but it's just amazing. And this stuff could happen. Randall Mills sounds like he's going to launch a whole country of 250 kilowatt engines for cars that would vastly outsize the entire electrical grid. It's going to happen tomorrow. Of course, he's been saying that for 40 years. But it's the sort of transition that if it ever happens, but is it real? Will it happen? Dave Antoniak knows far more about that than me. I better shut up. I warned you about that.
Well, you made an
Thanks.
interesting observation there about the relevance of technology, that when someone says we've got a crisis coming, it's amazing how human ingenuity emerges. Dave, you're a perfect example. And that human ingenuity leading to innovation, leading to commercialization, can sometimes absolutely overwhelm that particular issue. So at the moment, the theme has been energy security, which is maybe the silver lining of what is occurring out of the Ukraine, is everybody and their brothers now focus on energy security. Technology and innovation is beginning to focus on it. And we're hearing stories, whether it be nuclear or hydrogen. There are enormous sources of potential energy emerging in the world at large. We may find we've got an actual surplus emerging from sources we'd never even considered of before. In any case, Brent, your turn. Thank you, Bill. Brent, your turn.
Yeah, a couple of thoughts. I'll just jump in, maybe continuing a bit my earlier point. But the Minister Nally, he mentioned the multi-trillion-dollar global opportunity. You know, we use either 2.5 or 11 trillion, just like he mentioned. I'm not sure once I get over 1 trillion, I can't kind of keep those kind of numbers straight, but we know it's large. And I guess my point is, you know, if we're going to, you know, be part of that, you know, let's kind of think a bit more broadly, you know, even of that number, that's just not to produce hydrogen, that's the whole ecosystem around it. So I'm going to keep coming back to the diversification opportunity, you know, what other parts of that whole hydrogen value chain can we be involved in, you know, from producing it to, you know, being more involved in the equipment that needs to be manufactured. And I keep coming back to all the expertise that we have in Alberta and Edmonton around the oil and gas sector. So what we're trying to do at Edmonton Global is start to connect with some of these companies that have, you know, they've made their bread and butter in oil and gas, and many of these are already beginning to move down, you know, the hydrogen value chain as well. So some are clearly moving there, some are, you know, kind of still trying to figure out what's going to be happening. So, you know, that's pipeline technology, that's, you know, mobility, it's all sorts of different things. So I think we need to be, you know, thinking a little more broadly sometimes around the hydrogen opportunity and not just treating it like this is energy and we're just going to be, you know, continuing to be the providers of energy. That's wonderful. The, you know, the export market's really important as well. But, you know, I think we need to, you know, look at the expertise we've developed in oil and gas and other industrial sectors, and how do we leverage that, you know, most appropriately? Because again, now you're getting companies that want to locate here that maybe don't see themselves as an energy company, but they need to be, you know, part of that whole system that we have in place here. If you start to locate closer to your energy source. And I'm not trying to take pot shots at the technologies that you guys were all talking about a little bit earlier, because I do think there's some huge opportunities there as well. You know, the future Clean Hydrogen Center of Excellence that the province mentioned in the last budget. You know, I think that'll be a bit of a virtual center. It won't be a bricks and mortar type of center. But what we're seeing is some of these technologies, including ones, you know, that maybe were highlighted earlier. There's some of these methane pyrolysis technologies as well. You know, they're all looking to scale up, and they're really looking at Edmonton actually as a place they want to do that. So how do we become more part of that? What's the infrastructure we need to have in place for these types of companies? You know, and these are shorter term technologies. I think we always need to have a pipeline of future technologies over the longer term. But I guess the point I also make is a lot of these technologies, they exist today. It's more about getting them kind of into the market, doing some further de-risking around it, and not kind of searching for the perfect technology. You know, I know there's always nuclear, there's SMRs, and those will have roles, but there's some immediate opportunities, and industry is looking to decarbonize, you know, very quickly in the next several years. And that's why we're seeing these investments. It wasn't quite mentioned, but, you know, we talked about the refineries. I think it's the Canadian fuel standard that's saying, you know, you must be at this level of carbon intensity by this point in time. And, you know, that's why they're looking at more hydrogen projects to result in that lower carbon intensity of fuel. I don't have all the technical details on it, but that is driving things forward. So it is that regulatory framework that's partially, you know, behind what we're seeing as far as these investments. But how do we go further than that? What's the rest of that value chain we want to focus on? So I think that's what, you know, I want to keep talking about. You know, that's part of the message around our hydrogen hub here in Edmonton as well, that full value chain. You know, again, we get companies from Asia that are now talking to us to say, maybe there's a role for you now in some of this, you know, the manufacturing opportunities. So, you know, we think that's really important. That's, you know, transformational for this region and how we view ourselves as, you know, more than just, you know, the energy provider of the future, but other parts of that value chain again.
So like technology, I mean, I'm sure that hydrogen and the ecosystem need to be talked about. And you've used the word ecosystem really for the first time today. is the ecosystem that available to enable Dale's vision to emerge?
I think it's getting, oh, well, there's a hand up. I'll let, maybe Yogi wants to comment on that.
Okay, go ahead, Yogi.
Well, at the risk of stealing Brent's thunder, I think large elements of the ecosystem are there. And you just have to look at Brent's website and scroll down the list of exhibitors. It's mind-boggling what's there. And also, I think the point the minister made about the geology that we have that enables CCUS. So I would argue that, yes, the ecosystem is there. Where I think there's a cautionary note to be discussed, which we haven't discussed, is around cost. All of these things that we've been kicking around today are still operating at a cost level that doesn't quite get us there, which is why we need to have a hydrogen strategy. We need to have the event that Brent and his organization is putting on. So Brent didn't pay me to say that, so maybe he should explain that more, because I was impressed by what they're about.
So Brent, how long has this conference been in planning? I mean, this is relatively new to many of us, and the fact that a conference is being planned almost immediately implies that someone's been working on something for some time.
Well, we've been surprised ourselves. I joined Edmonton Global 1 year ago. I came from the Alberta government, and we were beginning to think, well, gee, we need to, get one of these big international conferences to come to Edmonton. So they come here for 1 year, then they go somewhere else the year after that. And some of our leadership at Edmonton Global, we had an opportunity when we went to, actually, I guess, as we were thinking about going off to the United Arab Emirates for a big international conference called ADIPEC, and some of you on this call may have been to one of these ADIPEC conferences. It's in Abu Dhabi. And, I think this initially started out as a little conference that the UAE put on for their energy sector. And well, guess what? Now, my understanding is on a COVID year, like November of 2021, they had 80,000 people showing up. So we actually had a reach out from the conference organizers. They're called DMG, stands for Daily Mail Group or something like that, from
down in Calgary.
Papers. And, we actually made a commitment at Edmonton Global. We said, we will work with you to bring a hydrogen conference to Edmonton. Right. But this isn't a one-time shot. This is a 10-year commitment that we're going to be the host of the Canadian Hydrogen Convention. So this will be the first one. And again, we thought, well, maybe we'll get a couple hundred people showing up, the usual suspects. And it's like, no way, Jose, this is.
How big is it?
Well, I mentioned, there's a strategic program. You can, find tickets to that. It's virtually sold out, and they've already moved the hallway in the Edmonton Convention Center twice to fit in the participants. So now it's about 650 or so people, being planned for the strategic conference. Pretty good size, but the trade floor will be, we're thinking somewhere between maybe 3,000 to 4,000. I've heard 5,000 people as well. So, okay, it's not 80,000 like in Abu Dhabi. You need a pretty big convention center for that size of fan base, but it's going to be really significant. About 100 exhibitors. Again, we got leading international companies coming in, some of the major multinationals. So again, and even just going back to Air Products, when they made this commitment to Edmonton, they're the world's largest hydrogen producing company. They could put a project anywhere, and they're doing that. They're working in the Middle East as well, but they chose Edmonton for the home for this first net zero facility. And again, they're using 95% CO2 capture with autothermal reforming, as Minister Nally mentioned. They're making internal use of the hydrogen for their operations. Another great example is Dow. Dow's looking at decarbonizing its entire fleet, and they're doing that, largely in Edmonton, actually, with 20% of their reductions coming from the planned retrofits of the Dow facility. Again, making use of hydrogen from CO2 capture and storage technologies as well. So, I mean, just coming back to the convention, though, we're seeing some deal flow associated with this. From the smaller companies that have new hydrogen production technologies. I've been talking to, the people coming from the United Arab Emirates. They're very interested in alternative technologies. Has to be at a certain level for them to be interested, but they're looking at aviation. And I should have mentioned as well, the aviation sector and the Edmonton International Airport is really a leader, and they're I think they're Canada's innovation airport. They call themselves. They're one of the first airports in the world to be a net zero airport by 2040, and hydrogen looks to be a major part of their plan moving forward. So that's another game changer, and that starts to even gets back to the vehicles when we start to talk about the Toyota and some of the vehicles. You start to look at how large fleets that maybe are operating at airports could spur the development and the demand for hydrogen mobility. it can really kind of accelerate things. So we're so excited by what's going on with that convention. So yeah, that's worth highlighting for sure. So have a look at the website. It's probably been posted already somewhere, but it's hydrogenexpo.com. It's DMG. And if you can't afford the full fare ticket, it is a little bit expensive, around $1,500. It's only $50 to get on the trade floor. And the Edmonton Hub is going to have a very major presence at that event with our leaders from our community. And again, we've got mayors from 5 of our municipalities within the Edmonton region that are on the leadership team. So, there's a high level commitment to hydrogen amongst those players.
So if you'll send me a little blurb, you probably got an ad that's generally available. I'll insert it in the next newsletter, because the next newsletter will provide some highlights for what we've discussed today and reference to the recording. But if I've got a notice of the ad, I'd certainly put it in there on that. The $50 level for sure will be more appealing to our audience than the $1,500. But
it's a story, Barry. I was just going to add, it's interesting. Just as I was sitting in on this event, I got a note from CBC News that British Columbia is going to create a hydrogen agency to attract investments. So I was saying, the race is on, or the competition is there. I think they highlighted $4 billion of investments in their pipeline. Well, you know what? In our pipeline, we have about $30 billion, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. So how do we actually, secure those investments? What do we need to be doing? Policies, incentives. I think, again, to build out that demand, we got to be focused on what incentives government can do, federal government, provincial government, and take a very coordinated approach. So we're not just spreading little bits of dollars all over every sector, but saying, to really catalyze change, here's where we need to start. Here's the incentive. Maybe it's the trucking sector, maybe it's a different sector, and start to grow that demand quickly.
Well, I'm sure it comes as a surprise to many, because this has not become mainstream in the media. I don't recall having seen an article or articles talking about the hydrogen economy. Well, there has been material on the hydrogen economy, but if Alberta is positioned as Dale is referring to, and this government is in fact behind it, and we have an ecosystem, as Yogi has said, that is in fact compatible with being a first mover, and we've got China, as we heard from our Chinese consulate when we did the sessions that Barry helped put together, that there is a pull in Asia that's enormous. I guess we look west with this as we talk about exports, and our capacity to move goods to the west is certainly better than to the east for a whole variety of reasons. We may be living in a prosperous paradise for many more years yet, in spite of what Ottawa thinks. Any other comments, questions, points that people want to make? You've all stayed around. I mean, we've got an audience. It's almost what we started with. So the topic, thank you, Yogi and Bill and Brent and Dale, even though you're not here, has clearly caught people's enough attention. Dawn, do you have a question? If so, you want to unmute?
Hi, Perry. I've just been listening, and pleased to see that Alberta is moving in this direction. And I am not a hydrogen expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I am involved with the ISCM Foundation, who has leading edge technology for green hydrogen and is very closely aligned with the European Union Hydrogen Alliance. And if you take a look at their list of members, you can see that some pretty prominent organizations from around the world are involved with that. So it gives you an idea of demand. And this technology, of course, can be used for fuel, for all sorts of transportation, for electricity, and it's there available for residential and commercial use. So as was indicated, having a strategy, a multifaceted strategy to roll this out across Canada would be wonderful. And this group that I'm involved in, they consider Canada to probably be one of the best candidates for this technology. But I'll tell you, I've reached out federally to the minister and didn't get much of a response. And then I've tried a little bit provincially in Alberta and BC, but not too much traction yet. So I'm really delighted that you're having this conversation today. And I hope that I can be of some help, being a born and bred Albertan, now residing on Vancouver Island, mind you.
Well, thanks, Dawn. Dan, you raised questions early on in the discussion, which I thought Dale handled reasonably well, about distribution. And it was a point that was made by several on if this product and our ecosystem is ready, then one of the fundamental questions becomes one, not even of market demand, but of being able to get to market, whether it be through tankers, or he's talking about rail. And there will be a lot of competition for rail, given demand for agri-foods and demand for fertilizer, demand for energy of all forms. There's even talk now about that rail system that was being conceived of for the North, being resurrected as a major corridor to get to the coast. Barry has pointed out that Prince Rupert is emerging as a potential major port on the western coast. All of the things we've been hearing for the last 6 months about the demand in Asia for energy and agri-foods is an enormous opportunity for Western Canada if we have the transportation and distribution systems to get there and regulatory regimes that are permissive. And I just have to underscore that, given Dale alluded to whether or not what we're doing here in Alberta is understood in the East or in Ottawa and compatible with their vision of Canada reaching net zero. Dan, did he answer your question adequately? Do you want to add anything further or make any comments? Dan Moeller? By the way, nice to see you, Dan. You and I haven't touched base since we looked at the stars together through your telescope, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it's been a while, Perry. Thanks for introducing me. Yes, I think the questions that I had were answered. Certainly, I'd like to see everything move faster, but I guess that's just being anxious for the future, if you wish. But I think that there's another piece that maybe is worthwhile raising. It wasn't one of my questions, but that is having a national energy corridor across Canada. I think is still a great idea, and I don't know where that idea kind of got lost, but I think it needs to be resurrected again, because there's lots of opportunities not only for sharing electricity, but sharing hydrogen across the country, and then being able to get it to both the Atlantic and the Pacific.
Well, postmodernism doesn't seem to care about building pipelines across Canada, but anyway, we know why it dies. It reaches the Ontario border. Blah blah blah. I'm not going to go any further. Dale tended to duck it as well. We can open it up, Shannon. I'm sure you'd have a lot to share here about the compatibility of the visions that emerge in the West with the views of the East as to mind your manners. Western.
Can I just maybe jump in, Perry? Just
please do.
Related
bail me out.
Well, I think it's maybe back to the export piece. We talked about rail, and I've been in some international markets over the past 6 months, and we hear these incredible examples of what's happening in Australia or what's happening in the Middle East, and we kind of look into the details, and lots of pretty big talk, of course, but then we find out, well, all this is a little pilot project to move a little bit of product, from those jurisdictions where they're producing it, and not always producing it in a more environmentally friendly manner. So Australia, and again, there may be others here that know more of this story than I do, but it looks like they can show we can move some product like ammonia to Japan for their markets. And then we kind of find out later, well, that hydrogen wasn't necessarily produced using CO2 capture and storage. It was from a more of a coal-based project, or a brown hydrogen, or whatever the color of the day is. So, and I think that's the story there is, we're kind of losing the maybe not PR, but we're losing the references to how we want to be moving these products to global markets. So, our thought was, well, maybe just simply showing that we can move ammonia. Maybe it's only one carb. I mean, we can basically do that today. So, why don't we start thinking about a way to demonstrate our commitment to these export projects? We know there's a 10-year timeline for the Japanese to get products there, and we may see some new technologies that emerge. But I think in the short term, it's really just to show, we're in the same space here as the UAE or the Saudis or the Australians, or even Chile for that matter. And I think right now it looks like we're stalled out sometimes, and we've heard that from some of the the market saying, well, are you guys getting your act together in Alberta and British Columbia and Canada? And I think we're beginning to, and there's some good positive actions we're beginning to hear about, but I think it's time that we do need to kind of show we're serious if we're going to be in this export game.
Well, fortunately, we have Edmonton Global that's going to give us a helping hand because that's your mission.
Yeah, no, and we work closely with groups like the Industrial Heartland Association. So, it's very much a collaborative effort.
If I may, just really as a quick moment here, I'm not going to get into the politics of East versus West. I do know of two other companies, hydrogen companies, one in BC and one actually operating here in Alberta that I've been associated with. And the reason that I asked the question, how we are intending to de-risk or deal with the possible obstacles to Alberta hydrogen, whether or not we're anticipating seeing the same obstacles present as we've seen in the oil and gas industry, is because one of the Alberta-based company that I was associated with, and if you don't mind, I'll just mention it's Loop Energy. They didn't even try to take their product across Canada first. They produce it here, but they are now working in Europe and providing hydrogen for buses and that sort of thing over in Germany. And there's a much more favorable perspective and marketplace for that product.
This is the challenge, Brent, that you have, or maybe we all have as Albertans, is how to get the message out of why Alberta and why Alberta, what advantages we have here. And one of them is the regulatory regimes that this province has had to live within should prepare it to be viewed as one of the safest, cleanest, most reliable jurisdictions on the planet, given the heat that this province has been on for umpteen years. I don't know whether you want to comment, any one of you, on that point.
So yes, delegations come from all over the planet regularly to visit the Alberta Energy Regulator.
Right.
Right. And what they're interested in is exactly what you say. How do we make that work? Mm-hmm. And except for the time period when the NDP government was in power, it worked very well. The NDP, they're in a kind of a schizophrenic mode. On one hand, they want money to spend on social programs. On the other hand, they have some anti-business tendencies. And the result of that was they found it very difficult to support regulatory recommendations to proceed with developments.
Peter, do you want to add? Peter, I saw your hand go up. Do you want to make a comment here?
Yes, excuse the mask. I mashed my face a couple of days ago. Anyway, I would just like to say that take a look at and note what Canadian Pacific is doing in Calgary in terms of building, and they have just built the first prototype hydrogen fuel cell locomotive, mainline locomotive. Uh-huh. It's a project that, from my point of view, I've been working in the application of hydrogen fuel cells for the powering of trains since 2013, mostly with Hydrogenics, which is located in Mississauga, but for which we won a major contract in Germany in 2015, which now sees commuter trains in Germany operating with Canadian-built hydrogen fuel cells. But what is happening in Calgary, and that's an evolution, and it came about coincidentally between various projects in applying fuel cells for the powering of Canadian locomotives, switchers, and main line, which everybody thought was not a priority. But when you think about it, that the Canadian rail sector burns 2 billion liters of diesel fuel a year, and the American sector burns about 15 million gallons of diesel fuel a year. And the total interchange of railway operations in North America in terms of diesel locomotives moving back and forth. But the scenario is, and the reason that CP got involved and was initiated to look at hydrogen was that its investor, TIC in London, one of the major, said a condition of our continued investment is you've got to show real progress action that you're lowering your carbon footprint. And so that motivated them. And a very similar thing has happened with the investors of Canadian National Railway, and they have pursued a different route. They bought themselves a battery-powered mainline locomotive and are investigating and testing renewed diesel and renewed natural gas. But what I'm saying is that the CP project, which consists not only of building a have built a mainline prototype operated by fuel cells, but it also involves a solar panel generated electricity for producing hydrogen in Calgary and a blue hydrogen producing unit in Edmonton, and the first prototype run will be doing. Now, just imagine that that project can be no other project like it is going on in the United States and the rest of Canada. It could be the core of what could become the whole of the North American railway operation powered by hydrogen. And I think that Alberta should really reinforce and do it. CP invested about half the funds and provided their own staff to do this development work. And the other part for the stations, fueling stations, came from, I think it's called Alberta Emissions Reduction Program, something like that. I'm just saying that on one side, yes, you can talk about the export opportunities, but on the other side, here is a technology development initiative that could change the whole of the North American rail sector and bring the rail sector from almost totally diesel operation to hydrogen operation, emissions-free hydrogen operation. I just put that out, and I personally satisfied that the goal that we set out in 2013 has been achieved.
Well, you reinforced the point that Dale did make, that the primary applications of hydrogen would be in transportation and heating. But I have a question, Yogi, Bill, Brent, anyone who wants to pitch in here. The world today seems to be focused more on electrification. What's the relationship between hydrogen and electrification?
Okay, well, I think it varies. So I like what Peter said around the hydrogen opportunity in railways, because big consumers, Peter said, and what he didn't mention was the number of refueling points you need is tiny to service the entire rail network in North America. Unlike if you're going to try and service consumer use of hydrogen, you need a huge number of refueling points.
Exactly.
So that's a genuine opportunity, as Peter's talking about. But in Europe, it's going to be a non-starter because they have electrified their entire rail system, and they're happy with that. And they've been doing that for decades. And that's been feasible because, as you can see on the map, how small and tiny and high density Europe is, the electrification works really well. When you get to North America, the area is dramatically larger, the density is lower, and electrification becomes horribly expensive. So hydrogen makes all kinds of sense.
So is the opportunity, we see the opportunity then for hydrogen and transportation in North America. What about Asia? What about China?
Well, China also is buying Ballard fuel cells for hydrogen. I'd just like to go back to your comment about when you talk about electrification, don't think that ever in North America, the freight railways will use overhead, go back and use overhead electrification and locomotives.
Yeah.
The cost is just out.
Not going to happen.
Yeah, that's not really where I was going.
And in Europe, believe it or not, in Germany, the reason that the purchase of 40 train sets and 80 train sets in hydrogen is because only 70% of Germany's rail lines are electrified. And the growth is in the regional commuter sector, which are currently diesel powered. So, and every other country has in Britain, well, in England, there's, there are plans on the route for 1,500 train sets for diesel, because the old, if you travel in Britain, it's a lot of diesel operations. And it's, in most cases, it's not the purchase of new locomotives, it's a retrofit of the existing locomotives. You take out the diesel engine, the alternator, and the fuel tank, and you replace it with a hydrogen fuel cell, a buffer battery, and a hydrogen storage vessels. And
Excellent.
everything else is the same.
I mean, you've given us the color of sort of closing the chapter on the relevance of hydrogen transportation, but I still don't, I guess I need to be more specific with what I was getting at. What is the relationship between hydrogen and the driving of turbines in order to generate electricity?
Bill wants to get in
Okay,
there.
Bill, jump in.
Did you say something?
Yeah, I was calling on you because your hand was up.
Okay, sorry, I lost audio for about 4 or 5 seconds. I didn't know what was happening. A very interesting question on the electricity, and something I noticed subtly in recent reading I did last week preparing for this. Had always been sort of an assumption. It's not true.
What assumption? You're breaking up.
Cars and fuel cells were perhaps better for longer distance, high energy. So that was kind of a rule of thumb, and there's always situations that change. But the impression I had fairly strongly in this last little while is there are indications that very serious looks at very high energy applications with batteries and rejecting the fuel cells. And it's not, by the way, that's not a decision. It's not a conclusion. Caterpillar had done a lot of work on heavy duty fuel cell vehicles. And they've just announced over the last 6-8 months, kind of partnerships or something, giant mining companies for battery powered giant haul trucks. The ones are bigger than probably most other places, but I'm assuming that Teck and anything else in Alberta would be that scale of truck. So for Caterpillar to be seriously developing that could plan to keep them on the map and keep people happy. But there are a number of other indicators whereby there's some serious decisions to swing to batteries instead of fuel cells for the heavy duty transportation. If that is the case, is there anything much left for fuel cells? But this is all way things, it's like spy versus spy, technology swings. But if the heavy duty stuff goes battery, and the trains, you can put anything, right? It's any technology. Once you get big enough, it's just more. So that is a good question, Perry, and it's something that struck me. I don't have an answer. Just like I don't, is coal the way to go? Should we be using coal? I mean, if you look at what the minister said and what everybody else has said, well, you could do that with coal just as well as you could do it with natural gas or petroleum or anything else. And there are countries in this world where coal is very strategic. I'm not so sure they're going to be all that happy about fluffy arguments about we should go green natural gas.
Okay, well, I've got 5:30. Thank you, Bill. Yogi, have any concluding comments? Brent had to get on his way. Mel, I haven't heard from you today, and you've usually got some cogent overview to provide, but Yogi, I'll give you a comment, and then I'm going to call on you, Mel.
Yeah, so I think I'm enthusiastic about the opportunity, as the minister and everybody has said. The reality that we still need to deal with is that there is a competitive cost issue. First of all, the price of blue and green hydrogen still has to come down some more, and I'm sure there are opportunities to bring it down. And then there's the issue of transportation. We've talked about rail, we've talked about pipelines. You will notice that our competitor, particularly the Middle East and Australia, are sitting right on the coast, whereas we have the better part of 1,000 kilometers of rail or pipeline that we have to deal with to get to a port. So these two cost issues, I think, we need to be careful about, because they are going to dampen our enthusiasm, whether we like it or not.
Well, someone asked early on, what are the negatives? I think it was Randall. And you pointed now to there are hurdles which haven't not been discussed in detail, because we've gotten excited about the opportunity.
And Bill touched on some of the safety issues, and there's solutions to that. And there's some technology hurdles that need to be dealt with, and I have high confidence that we can deal with all of that. What I'm just sounding a slightly cautionary note that we shouldn't just sweep these issues under the carpet in our enthusiasm to diversify our economy.
As I said, the session has been more of a love-in than a political forum. Mel, any concluding comments you want to share?
Not specifically, but I think Yogi summed it up pretty well there. One of the big things is that hydrogen as a whole, it's been around for a long time, and it's been used as in some of the things we're talking about for a while as well. But the general public doesn't really know a lot about it.
Right. And
the pricing of it can be pretty costly depending on where it comes from, the various options where you can get it as well. Elon Musk doesn't really like hydrogen powered vehicles, probably competitive type things. But, when you consider 7 kilograms of hydrogen can drive a vehicle about 300 kilometers, it's not too bad. Carrying that around, you'll have some people talking about safety and that type of thing. But I think the focus of a lot of this today was really on larger, let me call it stationary production of electricity through hydrogen. And there's a lot of work that's going on, but it's really got to get into the media and be understood by the media a lot more before we really get everybody on board.
And I think that point was made to Brent, is conferences are a way to help get the industry together, but that's not necessarily what's going to convince the public that it's here and now.
Exactly. Yep.
It is 5:30. I want to share with you, because many of you are regulars, that I'm not going to have a webinar next week unless someone wants to host one in my absence. I think I'm going to take a bit of a break. But I want to thank everyone who is fresh to the audience today. But Shannon, we hope to see you back. David, it was delightful to see you again in Harm 2. Alan, other than a walk around Lois Hall Park, I haven't seen you for a bit, but Dawn, keep on returning. There's so much that you share. And Peter, I enjoyed your viewpoint. So Peter, Greg, Bogdan, thank you all. And I'm going to say good night. So take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Good night, all. It's been fun.
It has been.